Hello folks, welcome back to the W Club Decanted. On this episode we sat down with the excellent Scott Sneddon, Managing Director of the InchDairnie Distillery. It was a wide-ranging chat with specific focus on their two new recent Kinglassie releases and the upcoming new Ryelaw vintage. If you're enjoying the podcast, please do share it with your whiskey-loving friends and or leave us a review. Enjoy the show.
Scott, welcome to the W Club Decanted. It's great to have you on the podcast. I suppose we'll start with your own journey in whiskey. You've recently become, last year, we were talking just before we started, Managing Director of InchDairnie. You were the distillery manager before that, I believe. Can you tell us a bit about maybe what you did beforehand and your current role within the business and how that change going from distillery manager to managing director has been for you?
So I started, my first job was not in whiskey. I did a degree in chemical engineering, so my first job was in salmon feed. So my job was in the R&D development side of that. After that period of time I moved to a business that made thermal insulation material, so completely different to salmon feed, and I was there for 7 years, and again it was starting off as development, leading its way into production management. And then 19 years ago I took the leap of faith to move north to join Whisky at Glenord Distillery. I was with Glenord for 4 years, and I was at Glenkinchie for 4.5 years. And then I got the opportunity to go to InchDairnie Distillery, and InchDairnie was an opportunity to take my chemical engineering background, my, I suppose, understanding quest for knowledge and development of whiskey and my foundations of whiskey that I'd achieved at Diageo. So InchDairnie was allowing me to do all of that in one role. So being there from very beginning, employee number 2, so I was given the drawings of the distillery and told, okay, that's a distillery, can you build it? So I built the distillery, trained the staff and created the team that is InchDairnie now. So the transition from distillery manager to managing director is a change, but not a huge change. You know, I still speak to the team every day. We've got a good operations team led by Martin, and we got a new assistant distillery manager last year, Rebecca. So there's a good foundation from an operations point of view. My role is doing more on what we see in front of us, talking about the brand, but then also looking at the strategy and being really an ambassador for the distillery where I can.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose you mentioned being there from the start, so it was a greenfield site when you started. You were there with the founder, Ian Palmer, at the time. What was that whole experience like, starting up a distillery from scratch? And I suppose this could be a good way to segue into, because it's not, as you kind of touched on there in your initial answer, it's not your run-of-the-mill single malt distillery. You're also quite experimental with your mash bills and the way you approach your whiskey production there. So that must have been quite a unique experience.
Yes, it was, and that's what excited me about it. Having been in the industry for 10 years to that point, being in a modern traditional distillery. So Glenord was automated, but it was, everybody knows how we make whiskey. The Porteous roller mill that we had was over 100 years old. We had when I went to Glenord, with a copper topped mash tun. While I was there, we transitioned to a stainless steel. When I went to Glenkinchie, I was introduced to worm tubs, which I hadn't experienced because it was mainly condensers. So I had a good breadth from there, but it was very traditional. So the opportunity to join Ian at InchDairnie was a completely different way of thinking. No, we don't have a roller mill, we've got a hammer mill. We don't have a mash tun, we've got a mash filter. Our condensers, we've got 2 condensers on our stills, not the traditional one, and then there was opportunity to then be looking at our Loman still, so a piece of equipment I'd never seen, never mind I'd operated. So it was all of this new equipment and a new approach that really excited me. And also, as you said there, my background had been in development, asking those questions, why are we doing it this way, why are we doing it that way? And at InchDairnie I was allowed to answer those questions. We talk about the principles of the 3 M's, material, method and maturation. So the material, we've been looking at different grains. So Kinglassie is a peated single malt, so we use this peated malt. We've also done Ryelaw, so we incorporated doing rye. We've done oats, we've done wheats, we've done a sour mash, we even did a pot still a few years ago, again using barley in the mash bill. From the method point of view, we also, by using the loam still, really understanding and learning how that works. So it was really an opportunity that was too good to let go.
Too good to let go. No, that makes perfect. I mean, it's one of the things that really excites me about your distillery and the whole operation is that kind of experiment with mash bills and that kind of thing. I actually have a question built on that, but before I jump onto that, can you talk us about the hammer mill? I believe it's partly what's represented on the top of these bottles.
Yeah, that's a good. So here, what basically is a hammer mill is as it sounds, is we've got on a spinning very fast, you've got like fingers of metal, and what happens is the grain comes down, it's getting hit multiple times with those hammers, and then at the very bottom of the mill is a perforated screen which is replicated on the neck of the bottle, so it means then only the finest grist will actually pass through the process into the next stage. So if MD sees our grist, it looks more like flour than your traditional grist where you can see your husk and your grist and your flour. Ours looks predominantly flour.
Yeah, and that allows you to work then with things like rye
much
easier, because that obviously would block up, I suppose, or cause issues within a traditional.
The rye as a grain is smaller than barley, so if you were doing that in a traditional distillery, you would have to do a different setting of the mill depending on what the grain is. Also, by going into that level, we can extract more flavour or different flavours from the husk and the actual grain itself that we then can take all the way through our process. So the hammer mill is a key part of our step. That's why we have it on our bottle.
And I suppose that then the other question I was going to ask related to that is, you mentioned the different styles that you've been producing there, the different types of mash bills you've been playing with, including pot still. I suppose the Ryelaw, when it came out, your inaugural release, which we'll come back to in a second, that was a single grain, even though it was a kind of the mash bill and the maturation was I suppose an American style whiskey. Was it 52% rye or 53% rye? How have you found sort of navigating within a sort of industry that's very kind of, the Scottish Whisky Association, very protective of Scotch as an identity, and I suppose that's really important because it's allowed it to grow and maintain its identity and consistency of quality, and it's it's very important for the consumer. But you're obviously trying to operate in that grey area where you're kind of pushing the boundaries, so to speak, within the industry. How have you found that side of things?
I think on the bottle we had to call it a single grain, but we called it a Fife single grain because we're proud of being in the area of Fife. It just means you have to spend more time educating the consumer, because people, when you say it's a single grain, automatically have a picture in their head of single grains that they've tried before.
Yeah, like a Glenord or something. Yeah.
So for us, it's about educating the people. I mean, it follows all the requirements to be called a rye whiskey. So we're working with SW about changing some of the labelling on the bottle, so the next release have a lot more information on it, so that people it'll still say single grain, but the label will just say that a little bit more about it being a rye, Scottish rye whiskey. So that's just about educating the people. And also, since we launched the Ryelaw, there's been more rye whiskies on the market from you get ones in Scotland, but also from England, Fielden being a good example. So there's a lot of whiskies out there that are leading the way, and we're working with them so that we can be educating the consumer.
No, that's excellent. So you mentioned Fife there, Fife single grain whiskey. I suppose you're a side note, maybe, if you don't mind me sharing with the listener. I believe you obviously live in the area, and you were one of the first families to walk across the new Fife Road Bridge. Can you tell us about that? He wasn't expecting this question.
Well, I'm not actually from Fife, so I stay in the borders. But yes, when during the first 6 years of my life at the distillery, I could see see the Queensferry crossing being built, and I was fortunate enough with my 3 sons that we were part of I think there was about 5,000 people allowed to walk over the bridge before it was officially opened. So I have that as a good memory, having watched it, and now I get to travel every day.
Marvellous. No, I'd say it was quite the experience. So I suppose getting back to the whiskey, five single grains. So you obviously started with around 2017. Was that your first year, or 2016? When did you start this?
2015.
2015. Oh, it was way off.
December 2015 is where we first produced.
And then your inaugural release came out in 2020.
2 years ago, 23 it came out.
23.
And
yes,
that was
your Ryelaw.
Rye, yes.
I suppose, could you tell us firstly about you've already kind of mentioned it, but the importance of Fife, how you drive your identities as would you say Fifonians?
I'm not too sure if it's Fifonians. Well, we're proud of being in Fife, so for anything that has got an InchDairnie badge on the front of it, it means we want to have the Fife province. So Fife grown, Fife distilled, Fife matured. So the Ryelaw that we spoke about, the first 2 years of Ryelaw production, it wasn't actually Fife grown, because when you decide to do something, you need at least 2 years to actually, beforehand, even 3, because you've got to sow the seed, grow the product, then you've got to harvest the product, you've got to malt it, and then you've got to wait. So it takes about 2-3 years to get to that point. So the first couple of years we used rye that we got from the Black Isle in up north, near Glenord, where I was my first distillery. So the later releases will be Fife grown. We use a local farmer in the Balgonia estate, so they grow all our barley for our InchDairnie single malt, but they also do the rye, and if we can try and do some speciality grains as we spoke about. But sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes we've had to go further afield just to get the grain that we're looking for, but we try anything we can to do is Fife. So rye is grown in Fife, the malted barley that is used in here was grown in Fife as well, because Fife provenance is important to us. No, excellent. I suppose then that brings us on to your inaugural release, because it's obviously called Ryelaw. It's a single grain whiskey, but it's kind of inspired by a rye, as we've touched on. But Ryelaw, it's not called Ryelaw because of the rye content. It's going back to the Fife thing. It's a field adjacent to the distillery. Yeah, it's a
farm. Sorry.
Yeah, Ryelaw farm is about 300-400 metres northwest of the distillery, and what we like to do is, for our different products, we give it a unique name. So Ryelaw, it helps the fact that we couldn't call it a rye whiskey, so we used Ryelaw farm.
Yeah, it's a bit of serendipity there.
It defines it. And then with Kinglassie is a small village just down from the distillery. So we like to be using local names to define our own brands.
And in terms of the launch of that inaugural release, I suppose, what was the thinking going for that particular grain mash makeup as the kind of the first release you were going to share with the world? Because you were, a lot of people, this is maybe a bit anecdotal, but just speaking to people around the time when you launched, you'd been kind of quietly doing this magic in Fife, and a lot of people didn't know, because you're not open to the public as a distillery. So you kind of came on the scene from nowhere to people who aren't total whiskey nerds, with this kind of single grain rye whiskey. Can you talk about the kind of the logic in making that your inaugural release, in terms of its style and what that was like?
I suppose with there's no book on the production of Scottish rye whiskey. So when we came to be doing it, we looked for inspiration in America. There's a lot of definitions. So for American rye, there's got to be a minimum of 50% rye. It has to be filled into the cask at less than 62.5%. And it has to go in a virgin oak cask, and that was the key part for the decision making on when we released it. A virgin oak cask, there's a lot of wood contact, so there's a lot of extractives, and we were trying to understand how far we could take it. One by that is the early years, there's a lot of extractives, it gives you a lot of lovely colour. But our concern was when we tasted it at 5 years old, it was well balanced and it was really good. But the unknown was where it would go after 6 years or where it would go at 7 years. So that's why we decided to release it at the time, because we felt at the time it was the best combination of the flavour of the spillet and the flavours that you get from the wood.
And then, but in terms of obviously we've got a single malt here as part of the Kinglassie range. So in terms of making that rye the first bit of liquid that you were going to share with the world, was there apart from just that kind of timing or the logic behind it, was it more of a statement, or what was the kind of logic there?
It was more to do with the liquid. The liquid is ready, but to go to the point, we do things differently. So there was an opportunity to do a bit of a statement that if you go onto our website, we talk about that we'll do our single malt in 2029. So while we were waiting, we're learning and understanding the other liquids, and we felt that was right. So it was a means of InchDairnie. InchDairnie as the name means hidden land close to water. So we've been kind of keeping below the radar. So it was an opportunity to start talking about who we are, and that innovation, that difference of thinking is very easy to talk about when you talk about a rye whisky. So it was meeting both marks. The liquid is ready, but it was a means of making a statement that we are more than just There's a lot of new distilleries that were built and operational when we were building and setting out. So it was a case of differentiating from people's thoughts and what they were expecting us to do, and what we did was something a bit different. And that's just really setting the foundation of who we are. We want to be pushing the boundary, and maybe people didn't think of a Scottish rye whisky before. So it was a good talking point, and the flavours are so different and can really showcase having the different equipment at the distillery, because flavour is key to us, and what better way is showing rye whisky in a different way.
And I suppose in terms of that, we've got the Kinglassie here. We won't jump right into the exact nature of that release, but the bottle is very similar to what you released the Ryelaw in. Can you talk a bit? We've already touched on the hammer mill, but it's such a sort of striking bottle when you see it on the shelf. Could you tell us a bit about the kind of the thought process behind that?
Yeah. So we'll start on the site. The bottle itself. Yes, it's a striking bottle that is for all of the InchDairnie brands. On the side of it, you'll see there's a ripple effect, and that's replicating our 3Ms, so the material, the method, the maturation, which is the foundation, the DNA of who we are. You spoke about the hammer mill, so we've got this to replicate here. We've changed the colour, because in the original Ryelaw it was more silver. This is more smoky grey to indicate that this is our smoky whisky, but we've kept the same standard. It's engineered, rather than people say it's produced, engineered to take into account that Ian and I are both engineers. And on the top we've got the same as we did with the Ryelaw. It says KG for Kinglassie, and then we've got the DNA wheel, so that's showcasing the chemical analysis of the new make spirit. So it's a bit like the DNA of it. It still has the InchDairnie in the bottom, showcasing that it's the foundation, but what we've also done in the original Ryelaw with the label up the side that gave the information, we've just brought it around the front just to give a little bit more information, but equally we've still got the little drawing that follows through the label that we had in the original Ryelaw. And the Ryelaw label, we had it showing the Loman still, so this one here is showcasing the wash still. Just a little bit of a nod to what we had done with the Ryelaw. So it's got small changes, but still keeping the same form that we had before.
No, it's a gorgeous bottle. I suppose we'll turn it back to the camera. And could you tell us a bit about these two releases, the Kinglassie they've come out this year? So I've got the peated.
You've got the raw. So we have two versions. We've got the double matured and we have the raw. So the double matured is both are 8 years old. And what we did is, the original concept is we wanted to look at peated whisky. When we talk about peated whisky, people automatically think of the heavy medicinal TCP phenolic compounds. So when we were looking at it, rather than going for Islay peat, which you can't get Islay peat, we went for mainland peat. And the mainland peat gives you more of a smokiness to it. And the production of our products there's an element of sweetness comes through. So what we did is, for the first 5 years we put all of the liquid in ex-bourbon casks. Then after 5 years, we took some of that out and we put it into Amontillado casks, and that's what we got here. So this is 8 years old, 5 years in an ex-bourbon cask, and then 3 years in the Amontillado cask. And what that does is, on the nose you don't really get an indication that it's actually peated. It's actually when you do the tasting, and what we are doing is, people who think peated will think it in a different way. So the Amontillado almost suppresses the peatiness on the nose. It's only when you taste it, and what it does, it gives you so it's almost hidden. You don't know what it is. You get a little bit of sweetness coming through, indicating the Amontillado cask that we've used. It's only then when you taste it, you then get the peated notes coming through. But there's a lovely chewiness to it, and there's a feeling of velvet. So that's why, if people want to talk about this, we talk about it being velvet almond smoke. So the velvet is that texture, the almond is the nuttiness that we're getting from the Amontillado cherry. It gives you that lovely nuttiness coming through it. Yeah. And then you get the peatiness, but the peatiness is not a hit, it's just there as that subtleness coming through. So the original plan is that we would only ever do this. This was how we were wanting to showcase. But equally, we have consumers, drinkers who, when you say peat, you've got those who either love it or hate it. So this was an opportunity for people who maybe weren't naturally drawn to peated whisky to come here. But what we did is, we still kept some of the original liquid in the ex-bourbon casks. Mm-hmm. And when we tasted it, it was like, wow, it's peat, but it's not an intenseness. It's almost like if you're getting in a fireplace. So we call this smouldering fireplace hit, as if you wanted to describe it. And what it is for people who like peated whisky. This is what we think they would equally like. So it's showcasing that going from the same starting point for 5 years, then at 5 years using different casks, and cask maturation being one of our 3 M's, is just taking it in a different direction. So what I'm hopeful is that people will enjoy both, but it's also showcasing that you can take the same source material and going in different directions. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking to people who are naturally drawn to peated drinking are drawn to the raw. People who are more non-peated whisky drinkers are being drawn to the double matured. Mm-hmm.
No, it's really interesting. I mean, the double matured is incredible. I mean, they're both gorgeous whiskies, but this one is it's buttery, but it's also quite tart. It's got a lovely nuttiness on it. The peat comes through. It really elongates the finish. It's an incredible whiskey, and a lot of it is driven by the mouthfeel as well. It's really interesting.
That's why we use the word velvet, because it's almost like this velvet. And I'm not I'm an engineer, but when I taste it, I just get this velvetness, this texture through it, and when speaking to other people, they also see, and it's that mouthfeel, and that's one way we want to be different, because having a whiskey, you want to get the full experience, know what you get on the nose, you get in the taste, and also the texture and how it is in your mouth. And then when you go to the raw is what people get. You get on the nose, there's more, you get the phenols in their nose right away, so, but then on the taste, it's giving you this peatiness, but it's a smokiness. It's not an intense that you get, and that's where using the mainland peat comes into its own. And as I said, it's an ex-bourbon cask, but still got some of those, the sweetness, some vanilla and the caramel, but then it's all interacting with that smokiness. And we felt that this is a wonderful dram here, but equally this is a fantastic dram. So that's why we decided to release both. It was never our intention to do both, but as we were looking and assessing the quality of the liquid, we felt that we had an opportunity here to showcase the same spirit but in a different way.
Yeah, no, I mean they're both incredible. This is brilliant because it's like deconstruct. It's like showing you the DNA. Going back to the nod for to the lid, the kind of the DNA of, and then this is kind of what it can become. And I presume other releases down the line will showcase other areas where the spirit can be taken.
Well, that's the beauty of where we are are in for the liquid is at the moment we're focused on these two variations, but we'll see how it matures. I've got some other ideas, but I need to be too careful that I don't try and do too much. And that's the thing with doing any development. You don't want to be too thin, because then you want to be focusing on it. And I feel that these two showcase the spirit in a really, really good way.
Yeah, excellent. No, they certainly do. Brilliant. So I suppose the other release that some of our listeners may have got their hands on or at least heard of was a release you did with us last year. It was 3 different whiskies called the Sample Room range, and it was launched exclusively with the Whisky shop, and it was your kind of follow-up release to Ryelaw. Can you tell us a bit about the Sample Room at InchDairnie and the thought behind that range?
Yeah, so at the time we'd not long released the Ryelaw, and a lot of people were asking, talking about the flavours and where were we going to be taking it next. And so that's where a bit of the tinkering went place. So we did 2 of the sample room ranges was based on rye, and what we did is, the rye whiskey is in virgin oak casks, but can we take it in a different direction with a different cask type? So what we did is we took some InchDairnie that we had maturing in different casks, and I blended it together just to understand what flavours it could give me. We always thought that the rye as a liquid is quite a delicate, but when we started playing about with it, it was holding its own. Even we could go 50%, which surprised us, and that gives me an indication that I think the rye as a spirit can also be going in different casks. So I used that as a bit of experimentation to see what direction I can take with the rye. The second one, where we actually mixed it with a peated malt, again understanding, can we use the rye spiciness, how does it cope with a peatiness? So that gave me the confidence and an idea of maybe in future releases I can take the rye whiskey and either finish it in a peated whiskey cask, possibly a Kinglassie, a Amontillado cask, or can I put it in the mash bill? So that gave us the confidence and understanding of what direction of travel it can be. The third one was taking what we had on the site and mixing it, some of them together. So it's a single malt because it's still from the site, but I was using a malt that would be using an ex-bourbon cask. I was using a bit of a peated malt, then I was using single malt that had been in I think it was an Oloroso cask. So by pulling that together, it would just identify and understanding how all these different flavours can combine to give me an understanding of what direction of travel we can take with the whisky. And the opportunity then came along to work with yourselves, who said we can show this to the consumers. So hopefully consumers is giving a little bit of an indication of what we can do as a distillery, and is giving us the confidence that maybe in the years to come we might try and do something a little bit different again with the stock that we have, because experimentation and development is part of who we are. But we know that it's not for everybody, it's only for a small portion of people, but it's given us the confidence to say, okay, there's definitely a route to travel here.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of route to travel and what's to come, what's next after Kinglassie? I know it's kind of fresh, so it's kind of, you're probably thinking in the moment now, but in terms of the long run, what's the plan?
Well, we still have the time scale of in 2029 our stock is 12 years old, so I'm working towards a possible release of a 12-year-old. But we've also got some of what we call the print laws. So the print laws is a bit experimentation. So as we spoke about, we've done oats whiskey, wheat whiskey, sour mash, and the pot still. So I'm listening and looking at how that whiskey is maturing. So in the not too distant future, I'm hopeful to release one of them. I don't know which one it is yet because I'm still listening to it. And then I'm also doing some tinkering in the background with some of the current casks. So I might be looking at doing something a little bit earlier than planned. So at this moment in time, there's a few things up my sleeve, a few things in the pipeline that will notify and communicate in near time. But for the moment, it's focusing on the Kinglassie. We've just established a foundation for that. For the Ryelaw later this year, I'm hoping to do the second batch of that. This is using the same grain as the original product, but rather than putting into wood from the Ozark, we put into wood from the Appalachian forests, and it is giving us a different flavour profile. So that's just changing the wood type, location, is giving me an indication of it's a different direction of travel. So that's coming out later this year.
So when you say the same whiskey in terms of the Ryelaw, because obviously that was a vintage release, it was,
yes.
you know, the label was 2017 vintage. Yes. So is it still going to be that 2017 vintage?
No, it'll be 2018.
2018, but it's just the same recipe.
So it's the same recipe, and it's actually the same grain that we used for the first vintage. It just we'd enough for 2 years worth of production. So it's the same grain, using the same parameters for the distillation, but we've put it into still American virgin oak,
I see,
but from a different region, and it has given us a different flavour profile.
And then, so this will be marketed as the 2018 vintage.
Yes, that's correct, and that'll be later on this year.
Marvelous. And in terms of the going back to the distillery, I know you've expanded recently, built new warehousing and that, which obviously which is happening at a time when a lot of whiskies go in the other direction where they're consolidating. Can you talk to me a bit about your setup in terms of the? I know we've touched on the production at the very start, but in terms of the footprint of the distillery, where it is in the area, and I know you place a real importance on kind of sustainability as well, and kind of methods you've taken to.
So we are on the outskirts of Glenrothes. So Glenrothes is a town. We are actually on the main road between Glenrothes and the town of Kinglassie, hence the reason of the Kinglassie. So we're in the end of an industrial estate. So the original site was a 10-acre site which contains the distillery and 7 of our warehouses. We also have a blending operation, a disgorging for the cask, so we can fill on site and disgorge on site and blend on site. So it just gives us total versatility. Last year we completed the first phase of our next development of warehousing, which we call our Westfield, and as you said, we installed 2 new stills, a carbon copy to the original pair. So it means the capacity is going from a 2 million potential to 4 million, and that's just future proofing the brand and the distillery. So that gives us a scope for going in a different direction, but also supporting other parts within the industry. You're right, sustainability is a key part of us. A few years ago we did our carbon footprint, and we are currently embarking on a progression to be B Corp certification. We're going to be applying for that later on this year. So from a sustainability point of view, we are looking at what we do as a distillery. So when we're going from 2 million to 4 million, we upgraded our boiler, and the boiler that we got is more than capable of making the steam for 4 million, but we made sure it can also run on a different fuel. So we've chosen it to be being hydrogen. So at the moment we run in natural gas, but it can also run in hydrogen. We're doing a lot of work on how we use our water. Our pot ale and our draft currently goes to a farm across the road, and that's linked to an anaerobic digestion plant. So they take those products and they create biogas. That biogas gets piped into the main gas main, which we then feed to feed our boiler. So we're working on that element. We're also doing a lot of work this year with the farm, Balgonia Estate. When we're looking at your carbon footprint, 30% of your carbon comes from the boiler, but about 68% actually comes from the growing of the barley and the malting of the barley. So we're working with our maltster, Muntons, and they've over the last 5 years halved the carbon footprint of their operations. So we're now looking at the farming front to see if there's farming methodology that we can be supportive of them. One of the things we're looking for is biodiversity in the farm and cover crops in the farm. That will be the benefit of the soil, but also by using the cover crop, the potential is that you'll use less fertiliser. Less fertiliser means you're using less carbon. So we're looking at all the way downstream, but we're also looking to the final product. How can we be, from producing of the bottle, can we look at that, be more sustainable, more long term? So you never stop. The focus is just moving upwards and downwards of our supply chain.
No, that's fascinating. I suppose because we had one of our earlier podcast episodes, I think it was episode 3, was with Nick Neen, and a lot of their focus is on sustainability. But where they, I hope I'm not misrepresenting their position here, but my understanding, obviously, because where they source their barley in, they don't really have, as much as they obviously are conscious of it. There's a third party element there where you're. So it's interesting that you're working down that supply chain. You have a head of sustainability as well, don't you?
Yeah,
Jess, is it?
Yeah, Jessica Stewart. Yeah, we've had the sustainability manager for the last year, so she's been doing a lot of work and just pulling together all of the things that we've been doing, but then giving us a clear structure and direction of travel of how can we. Sustainability is not you do it once and forget about it. It's a constant process, and all we're looking at is assessing our entire supply chain, and then we're focusing on key parts of that supply chain to be more efficient and more effective and more sustainable as well.
Mm-hmm. No, brilliant. No, it's really fantastic, and it's been great to kind of go through both the story of the brand and the distillery and these two fantastic releases. But now we're on to the fun questions, Scott. So the questions we ask everyone at the end of these podcasts. I suppose first off, food pairing you'd recommend with, I suppose, each of these or both of them.
I'm very much, if you have a really good rich meal, so either a good restaurant or even a good steak, something that's quite rich, there's a bit of creamer to that. I find that the peated whiskey cuts through that richness, so I've always been an advocate that I have a peated whiskey. My peated whiskey drinking tends to be more focused when it starts to get cold or it starts to snow. I automatically get drawn to it. But equally, if I'm out for a good meal, I like a peated whiskey because I just feel it cuts through the flavour. So I'm very much a pairing of good quality food, rich food. Everything will be well paired with these two.
No, that's a good answer. I can imagine something like this is maybe rude of me to insert my opinion here, but having tried this double cast for the first time on camera today, I'd say that would go with a nice salty blue cheese because it's both smoky and sweet,
well, it's
but also dry, so it'll kind of.
I think a smoky cheese, and what to do is try the whiskey first, then the cheese. Then do the cheese and then the whiskey, because the different flavour combination will impact the flavour of the cheese and the whiskey.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
I can see that as a good one.
I suppose the other thing related to that is the perfect serve for these in terms of a mixed drink. If you were going to have
well, I've not had the chance to experiment as much as I like, but I've been trying some of them as a highball. Or I like an old fashioned, but what I've been doing is I use the Ryelaw as a core, and what I've been doing is adding a small part of the raw into it, just to add a little bit of smokiness element to it. So I'm still perfecting that. I think the beauty of these both whiskies is it's fantastic, neat, but equally the raw I've really enjoyed as being as a highball or being used as within a cocktail.
I can definitely see that.
I've not been doing it with a double because the velvet texture and nuttiness, I think it just brings out just drinking his own, whereas the raw, I think that's where I see there's a lot of opportunity and potential in.
Yeah, no, that's another great answer. And I suppose the perfect music playlist that you'd put on when either drinking InchDairnie as a whole or particularly these two releases.
Music, I knew you were going to say that one. Well, I was actually at a Stereophonics concert at the weekend, and when I came back from the concert, I actually had a dram of this while still listening to some of the music from there. And
I didn't realise you were at Glastonbury the weekend.
No, Stereophonics was not at Glastonbury.
I'm joking.
I was here in Glasgow. So it actually worked really well. So I'd be happy for people to give recommendations on what they would listen to with these two drams. But I've not tried it, but just at the weekend there I thought I'd have a little sit down and just relax after the concert, and it does work well with stereo.
I can definitely see that. No, that's a great answer. I suppose in terms of your day-to-day working in the distillery, is there a particular band or music you listen to outside of just drinking the whiskies?
No, unfortunately I've got 3 boys, so they've got quite an eclectic music sense. So stereophonics is one from my youth. I'm seeing AC/DC in the summer,
cool.
and then I'm also seeing Sam Fender, which is from my son. I saw the Lumineers earlier in the year, and I saw Travis earlier in the year. So it's quite old and new. That's the joy of having children. That's the joy of having children. I am introducing my music to them, but equally they're introducing the new music to me.
Yeah, I saw Sam Fender in the London Stadium about 3 weeks ago, or there and thereabouts. I don't know the time this is coming out. Very good live. I highly recommend. So hopefully you'll enjoy that one. Your favourite whiskey that's not within the InchDairnie portfolio?
Can I have? Does it need to be one, or can it be two?
No, it can be as many as you want. Yeah.
So whiskey is a very personal, very emotional driven. So I've always got a bottle of Glenord 12-year-old in the house, because it was the first distillery I worked at, and it's where I got whiskey for the first time. Like a lot of people, I'd tried whiskey when I was younger and had a bad experience that I drank too much, so it kind of put me off for a little while. But when I went to Glenord, that's when I got it. So I would always say Glenord 12-year-old, fantastic. I've got a bit of a sweet tooth, and that's where I like the Glenord. So I love the Glenfarclas 15-year-old. I have a few bottles in the house, and all of them are out their sleeve, with the exception of the Glenfarclas, because I have to have another barrier to say, do you really deserve to have a drink of this? So that's there. But I'm fortunate, being in the whiskey industry, as we spoke about before, that we get exposed to lots of different whiskey. So I love whiskey. I like trying new whiskies. Those are the two, but they're very emotive to me. But I've got a lot of other ones that I love just trialing, and also as trying it in different circumstances, trying it with different people. Sometimes a whiskey work in one instance and not that. That's what I love about whiskey, is it's more than one dimensional. So I'm still learning out there of what other whiskies are looking at. I mean, out with my own, there's some cracking ones coming along and out there that I'm looking forward to trying.
No, excellent answer. And the last question is your first memory of drinking whiskey.
So I'm a chemical engineer, so my degree, I had to do a placement. So my placement was a year in North Wales, in the island of Anglesey, working for a company called Associated Octel. And what they did is they extracted bromine from seawater. And you're thinking, why are they doing that? The bromine was used as an anti-knock component for leaded petrol. That's how long ago we're talking. We're talking about 94, 95. So while I was there, we went out for a Christmas party, and I was the only Scotsman there. And as we went into the bar, they had the classic malts, the 5 classic malts in the bar. So we started on the first one, and we just went up the 5, down the 5, and back up again. So that was my first introduction to whiskey, and it took me 10 years to go over it.
To go back to.
Yeah. That was my first introduction to whiskey.
Marvellous. No, well, great answer. Again, Scott, listen, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving us your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and hopefully catch up again soon.
No, definitely.
Brilliant.
Thank you.